Russia keeps murdering civilians in Ukraine. And overnight, another war crime. It fired a missile at Ukraine's second biggest city, Kharkiv, and destroyed a residential building. 6 civilians dead, at least 16 injured. It's just pure terrorism. And now nearly 20 former US generals, ambassadors and officials have signed an op-ed urging US President Joe Biden to send more weapons, but also longer range weapons to Ukraine. They say Ukraine's being given only enough weapons to stop Russia, not beat it. And they say the very effective HIMARS missile systems that it's been given, well, they're great. But they have a range of, about 100K or something? And they say Ukraine needs systems that can strike nearly 400 kilometres. So what should we do to help? Joining me is Jack Keane, a retired 4-star general and former Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Army, is now Chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. General Keane, thank you for your time. These 20 top retired ambassadors, generals and security officials say in their letter that if Ukraine isn't given better weapons, Joe Biden risks turning victory into defeat. Are they right?
Yeah, well, I certainly have read that letter, and I couldn't agree more with it. Actually, what's happening on the ground now is testimony to the content of that letter. And by that I mean is that the Ukrainian forces have been planning for weeks a counteroffensive in the Kherson city area and in the larger oblast or province that Kherson city resides in. And what they've been doing is taking away the ground lines of communication or the bridges that provide the resupply to that city. And they have successfully done that. The Russians have happened to move some forces into the area to reinforce it, but they have not begun the counteroffensive. And our sources in the Ukrainian military are telling my analysts at the Institute for the Study of War that the reason why they haven't begun the counteroffensive is because they're not certain that the United States and the international community will be able to sustain the equipment that they need for the offensive to be successful. So they have, in a sense, paused that. They are also conducting sabotage and espionage against bases in Crimea, an air base and also a supply base. And the reason for that is because much of the supplies that are generated to help the Russian forces in the south come out of the Russian bases in Crimea. But we're seeing a pause in the counteroffensive due largely about the concern of U.S. and international community support, which is the central issue in the letter that you referenced.
What does Ukraine actually need? What sort of weapons are you talking about?
Yeah, well, they need more HIMARS. These are rocket artillery, and they have positioned HIMARS, which are referred to as GMARS for short, which can go 50, 60 miles with a high degree of accuracy. I mean, this is a 200-pound projectile. It's very much like a precision-guided bomb let out of an airplane, and they have used that very effectively against Russian depots and supply areas, and which has been sustaining their artillery. They need more of it. There's also, the United States has a much larger range a missile called the ATACMS, and that would go close to 300 miles. And that would be very helpful for them to be able to get that weapon system, for example, what it could do in Crimea to the bases there. But for the offensive to succeed, they need more tanks, more artillery, more things to help with their maneuver forces to close with the Russian forces, which are defending in the city. I understand there's going to be another drawdown announced by the United States, I've been told, by an official in the White House today coming this week. So we'll see if any of the equipment I'm just suggesting are on that list. I hope it is on the list. And it's not a question of just providing the equipment. It's a question also of being able to sustain it over time. And that has been an issue in itself. We need to keep up the supply lines and make certain that the volume is consistent over time.
But General, when you say, we need to be consistent over time, I'll tell you one thing about time. The risk is that people get bored. They turn away. The West is very good at that. We've read about it. We've seen about the war. What's next? What do you say to people who say, A, this is not really our fight, and, B, we're just, what we're doing by sending weapons, we're just increasing the agony and, look, forget it, move on?
Yeah, certainly, and reasonable people can make that argument, but the fact is, the war with Russia that NATO has been preparing for and stockpiling ammunition and putting troops into the Eastern European countries, NATO forces that is, and playing war games is here. Russia has invaded Ukraine, and if successful, and they're able to take this sovereign country and own and control this country, they will be encouraged to go further with that. And they have publicly stated, the rhetoric coming out of Putin is very specific, that he has designs on the former Soviet republics that are now part of NATO. And specifically, the first ones would be the Baltics, because they're the most vulnerable. And anybody looking at this has got to realize, if you're going to stop Russia from advancing on NATO, you've got to defeat Russia in Ukraine and punish them as a result of that, in that defeat, so they're not even capable of launching an attack against NATO countries. This, the way I look at it, is an opportunity to settle this once and for all. The Russians have started it, and the international community, obviously supporting the Ukrainian fighters, can finish this.
Well, as I see it, it's the first battle of World War III. We can either stop it here or it drags on and spreads to other countries. Meanwhile, China, and this is not unrelated, it is sending troops to Russia, not to fight in Ukraine, but to exercise with the Russian military. It's also announced more naval exercises around Taiwan, the island that it wants to take over, and that's done in response to the visit there of another 5 American politicians. How serious are these moves?
Well, certainly the partnership that the Russians and the Chinese have is a serious one, and obviously it was done just prior to the Russian invasion, and certainly while this invasion has not gone exactly the way the Russians expected it, that's not going to damage the relationship between China and Russia. They have mutual interests in changing the world order the way it currently is, with democratic nations creating and sustaining that world order. Obviously, the United States has a significant influence on it, and they want to stop that. It's not in their national interest. They want to have a different sphere of influence, and that is the reality that they're both operating with, and that is why President Xi is supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and would be likely that Putin would support the Chinese invasion of Taiwan. And certainly the aggressive activity we've seen just recently by the Chinese in reference to Taiwan as a result to Speaker Pelosi's visit certainly escalated things rather significantly. I do believe that the United States and our allies in the region have really got to get serious here about supporting Taiwan. I mean, let's learn a big lesson from Ukraine. We're providing most of the weapons to Ukraine after the invasion started. If we had gotten a lot of that in there before the invasion started, we'll never know this for sure, but it's possible that Putin could have been deterred. But in Taiwan, trying to get the weapons in after the invasion start, which is an island nation, means you'd have to fight your way in there to get the arms and munitions in there. We've got to get it in there now. And also, as a result of President Xi's recent escalation, I think we're completely justified to send in trainers to assist the Taiwan military, to send in planners to work the war plans with the Indo-Pacific region and our allies and partners in the region, with Japan, with Australia, and others, so that there is some synchronization of our collective efforts and what to do about a potential invasion of Taiwan by China.
Always terrific to talk to you for your insights. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.